Okay, so it is week 2, 3 of 2026. A lot has been happening already. Like my mind, is blowing up. We chose 2 pieces of news, and so I chose one that is very, Eurocentric, but I think could be, an interesting case study for what a lot of companies have to go through right now, which is they have to navigate this space without knowing what's going to happen next. And you have one that is a bit more global.
Yeah, and your topic starts in Europe, you're absolutely right, but then expands to incorporate the Netflix Warner Brothers deal and Paramount and all the mishigas going on there. And my topic comes from America. It's about 2 big tech companies, Apple and Google, and the fact that Google just hit $4 trillion in market value. But this has implications in every territory around the world and large implications for tech this year. And we're going to start with HBO Max finally, after a number of name changes, launching in Europe in a real way after not having done so in a while. Specifically in Germany is the topic that sparks this conversation. But tell us why this is important. And more importantly, tell us why HBO Max finally launching in Europe means so much more to the rest of the industry.
So they've been in the region, huh? They've been in a lot of different markets, Netherlands, Spain, France, etc. But what's big about this one is for the last few years, they were kind of locked into a partnership with Sky in some key markets. So France, Germany, Italy, and a few years back, France. Very much the old way of doing business, which is they licensed their content to a partner in each of those markets. These guys had, the HBO brand, all the programming.
But no standalone app in these regions.
No
HBO.
Exactly. Those deals, prevented Warner Bros. From launching HBO Max. So this deal ended December 2025. And so come last week, we're Jan 2026, and they've launched in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Italy. And in a couple of other markets like Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, if you want to.
UK?
No, UK is coming up in March. We have Greece as
So
well.
up until this point, HBO Max has not been launched in all of these territories and is still not launched in the UK. So there's this larger story here, which is they're super fucking late to the streaming game around the rest of the world compared to the rest of their competitors, which is one of the reasons why they're in such weak position in the marketplace and ready to be acquired. So there is that part of it. So they're launching here, and the way they're launching, the way you describe it in your Substack newsletter, Streaming Made Easy, is incredibly insightful and detailed. But just give us a top line of the approach that they're taking, given how late and far behind they are the rest of the big publishers.
Yeah, knowing that the UK and Germany are the 2 biggest M&E markets in Europe, right? So HBO has 128 million subscribers in all of those different markets. So they're hoping that those new launches that are so big are going to really, push them, upwards. So in terms of the launch, you're 5-10 years late, depending on who you look up to, a Disney, a Netflix.
Right.
And so what do you have to do? So from the get-go, there's knowledge about the programming, but little knowledge about the brand really, right? Because the brand was embodied by someone else, Sky. So there's a bit of work to do like that. But of course, at the bottom of this is that you need to be as widely distributed as possible. So even before the launch was effective, they actually announced a deal with RTL Plus. They're building a bundle, so you can get RTL Plus and HBO Max in Germany combined. So a lot of people are saying, what a lousy move because it's a commercial broadcaster. What does it have to do with anything? Well, RTL Plus is actually strong of several million subscribers, right? So that means that right out of the gates, HBO Max is going to be featured, showcased to that customer base. You had to that the fact that, RTL is the biggest commercial broadcaster in Germany. There's a brand, halo effect, so to say. So that was
it's hard for, I think, Americans to put their heads around what RTL equivalent would be here. But to a certain extent, this would be like distributing with Disney to a certain extent because you're getting
Yeah.
ABC and Disney Plus, a pre-installed streamer, a very large
Yeah.
broadcaster, commercial. It's a little like if BBC iPlayer and them combined in the UK. The difference there being that's purely a public broadcaster and no advertising on a lot of their platforms, including their streaming service. But it is a little bit equivalent as if
Yeah.
they had teamed up with Disney here or Amazon to a certain extent, but Disney because of the broadcasting, the ABC of it all, right?
Speaking of Amazon, second deal they announced was an extension of the partnership that they already have in the US and other key territories with Prime Video. So clearly, you have RTL, very local, and then that moved the global player, and we all know, right, how powerful Prime is, and especially
So
in
this is
UK and
aggregating
Germany.
HBO Max across Prime to Prime
Exactly.
subscribers for an upsell for an additional price, but then you're paying Amazon a piece of that. You made
Yeah,
a point in your piece in your newsletter, Streaming Made Easy, that Amazon's huge in Germany, and so
it
this is
is.
not as big as RTL, which is the market leader in Germany. So that bundle is going to be very effective for reach. But now you're with another top three player, which would be Amazon Prime.
So actually, what's tricky, right, is that RTL is playing they're playing in a lot of lanes because they're a commercial broadcaster, because they're trying to also be a premium streamer. They're mixing all of that, and so if you look at the play around RTL Plus, combined with Sky Germany, and we'll be talking about that, they could become the number 3 in the market with 11.5 million subscribers. Right now, with 7, I think there's not a lot of data on subscriber counts, but it's kind of like, Netflix, Prime, Disney being in that top 3. But yeah, absolutely. What they're doing is, they're scouting who's in market, who can I, use in a way to jumpstart and grow very,
Well,
very
and
quickly.
crucially, they're going from a licensed product that runs on Sky, so it's product that's embedded in a Sky Pay product, which is again compared to the United States, we have to really make the difference here. Pay TV cable, in this case satellite, in Europe is much smaller
Yeah,
than it is in the United States. Much
yeah,
smaller.
yeah.
So they come from an embedded product there to now widely distributed on RTL and Amazon as a standalone app. Correct? It is not disaggregated or disintermediated. It is the standalone app for sale, much like it is here on a lot of cable and MVPD products in the United States. But they're going wider than that. This is to your headline in your piece in Streaming Made Easy, your Substack newsletter, is go big or go home. So your point, I think, is be on every shelf space you can possibly be. And this is their approach to all of Europe now, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting, and the reason why perhaps sometimes when you guys look at what's going on and the partnerships deal that you're seeing, you're like, why this and that, right? In
Right.
the US, I think you see the deal with the Charter and Co. You do
Right.
Roku, you go direct, you do
Comcast.
Prime. But would you do a bundle with another broadcaster streamer? Question mark. We're starting to
But
see
with
more
Amazon,
and more.
you're doing that. Here in the
Yeah,
United States, everybody chooses to partner with Amazon. Everybody now
yeah.
chooses to partner. I think Netflix is either done it or about to do
No,
it.
they haven't done it.
They will. That will happen this
And
year
Disney either, actually.
because they want to control all the signups. But
Of
there's going to
course.
come a point where both Disney and Netflix join a bundle. That was my barking dog. There's going to come a point where Disney and Netflix join a bundle with Amazon because they're not going to have a choice. Retail is now number
Yeah,
2 bundler on the planet Earth. We know this from our friends at Bango. The number 2 bundler after Telco. And that's the other big thing. You're going to find Netflix and Disney in these bundles, which again is why this rollout for Max is pretty indicative. I did an interview with the LA Times, which you can go read, where I called this one in a pattern. If you
yeah.
go back, and France is another market where HBO Max is now attacking. If you go back and you look at the Netflix TF1 deal and the Amazon France Television deal, this is one in that pattern.
Yeah.
This is not even the first one of these deals, RTL Max, and it won't anywhere be the last. We're going to see a lot of super bundling with, and I think this is really important. Each country, it's like having a different major broadcaster in each state in the United States. Each country in Europe has
Mm.
a major player like RTL, like BBC, like France Television, who are going to be powerful partners for the American and global streamers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone is being very pragmatic. There's no way to actually win, alone. So deals that were, impossible to think about a few years ago are being done right now. In terms of the timing, right? It's insane when you think of it. I don't know if any of those deals were negotiated. I think a lot of those deals were negotiated
A long
before.
time ago. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
like a year and a half ago.
yeah,
Yeah,
they were
absolutely.
probably signed either before or these last few weeks. And the question is, did any of those distribution players have put any provisions in there in terms of, what's going to happen when Netflix buys you?
Honestly, I think that the richness of the deals that they've set in place, which they set in place a long time ago,
Yeah.
I would say before they decided to split. Because as they come up with that split idea, which predates the bidding war, right? And this is why this story is much larger. Now we're into the Netflix Paramount offering for
Yeah.
HBO Max part of this conversation. They had to have made those decisions before they decided on how to split up the company. They
Yeah.
had to. And so, but part of that is look how good these deals, look at all the upside in Europe alone, Ted Sarandos.
Yeah.
In Europe alone, with all this content, David and Larry Ellison, because David doesn't do anything that Larry's midsection doesn't tell him to do. So there's a lot of this is one of the reasons why the valuation of Warner Brothers is climbing while Netflix and Paramount plummet as they make these ridiculous offers. And as we discuss this right now, yesterday Paramount threatens to sue the Warner Brothers board, and they want details of the Netflix offer. Today we hear Netflix is redoing their offer to be 100%
All cash.
cash,
Yeah.
which is exactly what Zaslav wanted from a competing offer from Paramount. And so the richness of the potential upside, and I think we should talk about pricing too, because the pricing approach for HBO Max is also, I think, really clearly indicates that these decisions were made last
Mm.
summer, last spring, maybe even as long as a year ago. Talk a bit about how they're rolling out the pricing in each one of these markets.
So we're paying in Europe less than you guys. I'd say 25% less than what you're paying. We've
For
seen
HBO Max.
some, yeah, for HBO Max. We've seen some price increases at the back of last year in some key markets, but interestingly enough, in France it stayed the same, which tells me that maybe they're seeing some sort of price sensitivity or struggling to acquire subscribers, because out of all of those, EU5 very strong markets, it's the lowest. But so they decided to go for a 5.99, 11.99, and I think 17.99 or something. There's no launch promo, which they had done in the past, which is a deal that I got when they launched
So
in the
that was
Netherlands.
a 50% off
Yeah,
or 6
big
months
mistake.
free or something. Yeah, right.
Big
So they
mistake.
could never claw back the price. Yeah.
Well, they've tried, or they've written to me many times telling me that, I'd be moving to, the basic with ads and et cetera, et cetera. So all in all, they're trying to play catch up with that. But they've noticed that, of course, it is helping you to acquire subscribers at the top. But, forever pricing like that, it's actually, a challenge, from a margin perspective in the long run. So just one thing, just to finish up on that. Uh, What's interesting about the pricing, it is cheaper than in the US. It's pretty aligned with other markets, except for one thing on sports, right? They have historically had this add-on, which is kind of legacy Eurosport. So all of that pricing you've seen, it is exclusive of sports
Oh, wow.
as a rule, right, in most markets. So it's a bit more expensive than, it leads to believe. Having said that, as part of this launch, they've decided to isolate the Winter Olympics, meaning that all plans will get access to the Olympics in February
Without the sports add-on.
without needing that
And that's a
add-on.
huge difference. Here in the United States, NBC has the Olympics locked up forever, right?
Mm.
But in Europe, HBO has Max has a lot of sports that they don't have here. That's one of the reasons why Sky was so into them, was they used them as a sports product as a great deal, as its own tier, I believe, or some kind of add-on example. And that's, again, I think why these plans have been laid out for some time. They will be a very big value add to either Paramount or Netflix in Europe for years and years to come because of these great packages, including the friggin' Olympics. That's really important. Now, we should also note that each one of the countries in Europe will have the Olympics on their broadcaster, but not in sometimes the same depth that Discovery has.
It's they did this with they launched in France a few weeks ahead of the Paris Olympics, right? So it is a move that they've made in the past. So the reason why they're repeating, they've seen that it is a major acquisition driver, and I'm assuming they've managed to keep people, to retain those subscribers that they got from the launch from such a big sports event. One thing that is important is that it looks cheap as it is right now, but so talking about the potential impact of this thing,
like $7 or $8 for the consumer if they want sports this year, and that goes to $9 next year if they want sports. Is that right?
Well, no, it's €3 add-on.
Oh, wow. So it goes from 6 to 9 this year and 7 to 10 next year. So you can lock in the price for life if you subscribe this year at 6 and 9, and then next year it climbs to 7 and 10.
Yeah, exactly.
6, 7, by the way.
It is extremely cheap for you guys. Not so cheap, I think, for us.
Not
right?
in a territory where you're already paying for RTL Plus, probably, and then you get all this free broadcasting from whichever country you're in, or ARD and ZDF in Germany, France Television in France, BBC, and the rest in the UK.
So two things, right? About and then we can move on around Netflix and everything, because how challenging it must be to work towards that launch. And the UK is going to launch in March, knowing that by the end of the year, perhaps, you have a new owner. I wonder if this will have an impact on consumers, like, should I get it now or should I wait because I have Netflix? ? I don't know.
Do you think most consumers understand the territorial nature of those types of things? I mean, we do. We live in a bubble, though. Our listeners, this is a community that pays very close attention to this.
I agree, but
I either want Game of Thrones or I don't want Game of Thrones, right?
I agree, but Netflix did write to every single consumer, on the planet.
We're getting this. I know. Yeah, I think though this European rollout is one of those things and Mark, you got March Madness coming out here in the United States very soon, which is a massive television event across all of the Disco Brothers properties. But let's twist to this. This thing is so far from over, and Netflix acting as if is just really silly. They look moronic. Ted and Greg strolling around the lot with Daz is going to look like painting the infield too early during the World Series. It's just silly. And it shows that this is about not always money. A lot of times it's about ego. But we have these twists here. So Netflix is now sharpening its pencils and revising its deal offer, which they swore that they wouldn't do, just like they swore they never take ads and never do sports and never become TV. They're becoming television. And the Ellisons are now suing the Warner Brothers board to see the details of the Netflix deal. And those things happen one after another. Crucially, right now, if you look at since the bidding began, Paramount's value, its market valuation, is down 36%. Netflix is down 25%. It's down $120-ish billion in valuation. Meanwhile, Warner Brothers Discovery Disco Bros is up 40+%.
Yeah.
Zaslav is making these two guys look stupid. The three guys, if you include Greg in this, Ted, and actually four guys, Larry and Davey and Greggy and Teddy, are all looking silly, sharpening their pencils, offering more billions and billions of dollars on this. My question to you is, now that we've looked at Max through the European lens and how much pure upside, here in the United States, we see Max as fully penetrated, right? As disgusting as that phrase sounds when you mention David Zaslav and penetration. The flip of that is, in Europe, they have a ton of ground to make up because they're really behind. And so there could be a great deal of value both companies who are bidding see in jumping in here. But how do you see, is this a really good deal just purely from the upside in Europe potential for both Paramount who already owns Channel 5, and Netflix, who has deep penetration in a lot of these territories. It's the number 2 streamer in many of these territories. What do you see when you look at this battle for Warner Brothers Discovery?
So honestly, like to me, the best distribution playbook has always been Netflix, and everyone is playing catch up. The only difference being that they are not making any concessions, right? So right now, they want to be in Prime, and they're very careful where they're being bundled, etc. But they are pretty much everywhere. So HBO can gain from that. I don't see how Netflix is gaining anything from HBO on that front. So the gain from HBO is very much the brand, it's the programming, the sports rights. So for sure, because that means Netflix would be, owners of the Olympics, Tour de France, so
Because
many
I think what it's
amazing
all
rights.
about, I think it's all about that is if you look at their worldwide strategy, it's about live and sports. Christmas Day had
Yeah.
2 big, huge football games, 2 big, huge football games. One of them really the most live streamed event in sporting streaming history. So I think there's a great deal of value they're
Yeah.
associating.
And let's be also mindful of, the library, the IP,
Right.
we love movies, we go to the movies still. So there's a lot of value in doing that. The only thing being that we're very pro regulation in Europe when it comes to windowing strategy. So when we hear Netflix saying, "Oh, we'll give you that 17 days thing," well, just on the French market to give you an idea, when Netflix co-produces a movie that goes to theater, it can only stream it 15 months later.
Right.
Not 15
Right.
days, 15 months. So there's gonna be a lot of, lobbying and regulation on that front. They're gonna be shaking that
I
ecosystem.
wanna go back and double click on something really important, though. Up until this point, most of the HBO library, most of the Warner library through the HBO deal, because not all
Yeah.
Warner stuff airs on HBO Max, but most of it eventually
Yeah.
gets there for a long period. Most of that stuff has been trapped behind a Sky paywall, which is not a very highly penetrated product in the European markets, correct?
Yeah, well, it is it's a small we're talking
10%?
3, 4 million in
Yeah.
Germany.
Right, it's
Yeah,
tiny compared to everything else. So a lot of that content is completely underexploited. The Warner Library is very underexploited in the territory compared to the United States. So it does feel like both companies are weighing Europe, 400 million people.
yeah,
They're not distributed in the UK basically, just
yeah.
behind the Sky paywall, which is less than 10% of viewership in the UK. In Germany, it's about the same thing. So we're talking about a massive upside there. So I think that helps explain
I
some
agree.
of the irrationality around Paramount, especially when you consider the Olympics and other sports there. Some of the American view of irrational
Yeah.
bidding that's going on. Is that a fair statement
Yeah,
after we've
I think that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but if you look at what Netflix has to gain in the States, we've seen it, right? There's a bit
not
of a
much?
plateau. The growth is often in EMEA, APAC, and LATAM. So if you look at it from that perspective, yeah, I see what you mean. There's a lot of, and especially because Warner, regardless of Sky, but was very much in the business of licensing, all around the world, and
Right.
there's a lot of library.
Completely different difference.
I agree.
Completely
Yeah.
different business than Netflix is in. And then you add to the fact that now all these eyeballs added ad impressions, and suddenly you can start to do the math there, where from a purely American standpoint, as I have been taking all this time, this looks like bad math. It makes a little bit more sense when you look at it through the lens of, "Hey, there's 400 million people this content isn't
Yeah.
reaching." From a subscriber standpoint, it may not get them that many more new subscribers, but retention absolutely from a content depth standpoint, and then the Olympics and sports, and it could
Yeah.
bring in new subscribers, but certainly new ad dollars.
I would. So what's gonna happen for consumers, most likely, it's the price are gonna almost double for Netflix when they get HBO. If there's that much live,
I think
so much
yes and
content.
so I think yes
Yeah.
and without ads, absolutely, but I think with ads, I think there'll be a better
No.
pricing for them.
I agree. I agree with ads, but without ads, I mean, oh my God, I have the 2 subscription. I would take one that has the 2, and even in terms of that simplicity of watching content, etc., one bill, the customer, not the customer, the viewing experience, the Netflix product is better. Let's be as it is right now. It is better than HBO Max. So what's going to happen is big price increases, but I don't know if they're going to be able, if Netflix is going to recruit that many new people. I think it's mostly going to be people who are already
We agree, but
at
if you look at
HBO.
the digital eye data that you put out in your
Yeah.
report, in your piece, Streaming Made Easy, a Substack newsletter, you'll
I've paid
see.
you, right, to
Yeah, yeah.
mention that so
Well,
many times.
but that's what happens when I turn my power on someone else.
Yeah, I love it.
No, the key here is you show that there's a huge upside. So Netflix,
Yeah.
in that same digital eye data, Netflix is actually doing quite well in
Mhm.
adding people to its ad tier.
Yeah,
HBO Max
not so
sucks
much.
at that. They're terrible at it
Yeah,
here in the US and especially in Europe. And so we agree. It's more, hey, get a few more people, especially given the sports of it,
yeah,
but then also upsell the ad tier, which is where a lot of the growth will come
yeah,
from. So I
yeah,
think we've shown really well why this is this RTL HBO Max deal and HBO Max hitting Europe is a much bigger deal, a much bigger issue with bigger implications around the entire media universe. Yeah.
yeah. And let's wait for the launch in March. And also,
In the
there's a
UK,
lot
yeah,
more.
right.
There's a lot more big deals that are missing, right? So Magenta,
Right.
biggest telco in Germany, no deal. I haven't seen any deal.
Yeah, there's all the telco deals. Right.
Vodafone, no. So a lot of those, and I'm thinking Magenta being so big, we're talking 4.7 million pay TV subscribers. They have a lot of bundles. They're bundling RTL Plus. They're bundling everything, everyone. They are the super aggregator of Germany. I'm thinking they do not like, having this Netflix slash HBO Max deal.
No, that's gonna that's a good point. So yeah, your point. I think there's a larger bundling is going to continue all year long, and the major bundlers in Europe, in particular, are the telcos.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of other shoes to drop. Disco Brothers is out there. They have to operate the company as good stewards, although it's really doubtful that David Zaslav could ever call himself a good steward, although he has managed to get the price back up to a place that it's never been in his entire tenure just by putting it for sale. So credit to him on that.
Yeah, he doesn't care
But
about any of the stabs you're taking at him. He's so comfortable,
I know he's doing
having
quite well,
people
and he's going
being
to walk away
over.
with $500 million personally when
Yeah,
that deal closes. But that
bravo.
deal is a long way from
Yeah,
closing. So, as good stewards of that company, and to make sure that deal closes at the optimum price, they have to continue to go out there and make those
yeah,
bundling deals.
yeah,
So we have to keep watching every Max deal with a Vodafone or a
yeah,
Magenta or an O2 or Liberty or anyone like that. We should be paying attention to because
yeah.
that's one more leverage point that Zaslav has in his negotiations with Sarandos and Greg, whose last name I can never remember, and
Peterson.
Ellison.
So, okay, enough with Europe, enough with
Thank you.
HBO. Yeah, we love you guys. I love you guys.
I love Europe. I'm coming there soon.
Okay, so let's turn to the US. You're saying it's very US, but it has global implications. So I think that's why it's interesting to discuss on the pod. So what's happening on your map? Something's happening on your map.
Right. So I think this may have fallen off the radar a lot of people because it's the beginning of the year. CES was there. Everybody's talking about a bunch of different things, including the world being on fire. But inside all of the data that we see every day, in the first week in January, on January 7th, Google surpassed Apple in market capitalization, in total value for the first time this decade. It's only the third time ever, and every other previous time it was just for a couple of weeks. It had stayed there. And then a couple of days after it surpassed Apple in market cap, Google hit $4 trillion in valuation for the first time ever.
Insane.
And I think this missed a lot of people's radar. And I think that's because, these things happen. Companies go up and down. Microsoft was more valuable than Apple was more valuable than Microsoft. NVIDIA was at $5 trillion this past fall. So it's just a stock price thing. And these things balloon and come back down. And yes, it's tempting to look at it that way. But there are a couple of other data points that I wrote about on my Substack newsletter, Media War and Peace, last week, just before CES, that point to this being a much larger trend and a much bigger story inside media big tech and AI in particular. And so to add on to the data point that Google is now worth $4 trillion, it's worth more than Apple. Last year, in 2025, for the first time ever, Google search revenue alone surpassed iPhone sales revenue.
No.
That's never happened before. That's a big moment in time. And it's a big change in fortunes over the last number of years. It didn't just beat it beat it handily, 230 billion to 209 billion.
At a time where search revenues are actually fragile, right, on Google's side because of AI. We'll speak to that a bit later.
We can talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
So I can talk about why this is such a big deal. To be blunt, search and intelligence revenue, advertising revenue, is now more than 20% of the advertising economy. And 97% of that goes to Google.
Yeah.
So search revenue continues to climb. It grew at a nice clip last year. It will grow at another good clip this year, but it will flatten. That is a flattening business. There's no question about it. Unless you take search and you wind it in with intelligence. If you see AI as the next generation of search, well, then absolutely, those two things together are still a growth industry through the end of this decade and far beyond, as the market keeps indicating by overvaluing a great deal of these AI products.
Yeah.
But it's another data point there is that last year, so it wasn't the first time ever, but it's only the second time after 2024, Alphabet's net income is now substantially higher than Apple's. Right? So Google, its number one product, 56% of its revenue, is now bigger than the iPhone, which is 50% plus of Apple's income. If you look at Apple iPhone revenue over the course of this decade, it is basically flat. If you look at search revenue, absent 1 year around the post-COVID correction, it is up and to the right for search. And then you think about the AI market. So let's lean into that. The reason why Google is now worth more than Apple is a much larger market restacking. Intelligence is now worth more than hardware, right? And if you look at the intelligence bundle, that is Google, not just search, but the two largest search engines on earth, Google and YouTube.
Yeah.
The largest television channel in the United States. Barb just put out a piece of data that YouTube beat BBC in certain metrics with all consumers.
3-minute consumption, not
right.
the 15
but
minutes.
as I predicted a year ago, we are seeing this happen. And then you add Gmail and browser, which they have 67% of browser. And you think about this as an intelligence bundle. And then you think about AI itself, which I have written about recently in my predictions article for Media War and Peace, my Substack newsletter. I went into great big detail about the closed loop, the circular economy, the circle jerk economy, as I like to call it, and talked about it at CES, which is NVIDIA and Microsoft all buying each other's stuff and round tripping $1 trillion and fooling people into this idea that AI is going to be a subscription revenue product. It will not be a subscription revenue product only. It'll be part of the subscription economy. But Google sees AI as search, the next generation of search. Google serves 10 billion searches a day. Every single one of them comes with a Gemini ad in the upper left-hand corner. Most of them come with Gemini results. AI overviews. And if you listen to Pinchar, the CEO of Google, they see AI overviews monetizing at the same rate as search.
Yeah.
So Google sees AI as the next generation of intelligence, of the next generation of search. Search is already outpacing iPhone sales. That's momentous, right? And Google, of all of the big tech companies in the AI race, if you look at OpenAI, they're bleeding money and they have no penciled out math to prove that that's ever going to change. And most of the AI platforms, the large language platforms out there, are in the same boat. This is not just my opinion. This is Michael Burry, who is behind The Big Short, and Andrew Ross Sorkin, who is behind Succession. But crucially, when you look at AI usage itself, OpenAI is the number one, hey, I'm going to choose to use AI right now, right? But it is losing market share every day to Gemini. And every day, Gemini is serving a tremendous amount of AI usage that isn't in that count. They are going to be part of a much larger bundle of services, intelligent flywheel, that Google is serving. And the ad product is going to fund, I think, Google to winning the AI race in a different product set. So that's why I think this was a big moment in time. I will stop monologuing now and see if you have any questions about any of that.
I feel like I'm at school. The teacher will
Well, I'm sorry, but I think it's a much bigger moment than most people seem to be realizing.
No, I completely agree. I think it's always a question of who has an ecosystem. And so we know Goliath, Google has one, versus, so Apple has one, but one that is not, innovating enough. And funny enough, on AI, who are they turning to get smart, to bring, intelligence? They're going to be using Gemini, not OpenAI, no, not anyone else.
Paying Google to use their intelligence.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. Of course, it's fascinating to see how that company has flipped things around, because a year ago, everyone was like, oh my God, Google. Like, oh my God, they're being disrupted. What's going to happen? Everyone thought,
AI search, you mean?
Yeah. That OpenAI was it, that they were so advanced. And Google spent the entire year playing catch up, let's be clear.
Sure.
But whenever they've released a product, Nano, Banana, Gemini, all of those things, they've been able to grow. Is it Nano? Is that, or VO? I can never remember. Anyway, I'm getting lost in it. But they've played catch up, and they've been able to surpass, from a quality perspective, what OpenAI is doing, but more importantly,
100%.
said it, because there's a flywheel, because there's this entire ecosystem. They don't have to build everything from scratch, right? So yes, this can be a subscription, but more importantly, it's going to be advertising. Whereas at this moment in time, OpenAI is thinking, it is a David, right? It's thinking, okay, how am I building an advertising business? How am I growing that subscription?
I don't think OpenAI is thinking about their advertising business.
I think they are.
Not in the same way. They see. I think when you look at most of these businesses, they're focused on ARR, recurring revenue, as the mainstay. And you look at the circular loop that I diagrammed on my Substack newsletter, Media, War and Peace, and you can see how they're mapping this out. Now, maybe there's an ad plan in there, but they're not shouting it from the mountaintops. And clearly, the number one ad platform on earth, Google, the number one ad platform on earth, has a huge advantage in the transference of ad dollars in search intelligence to AI. The other important thing to understand about the quality here and the economics, two important points. And it's this, it is Google as a closed loop versus OpenAI round tripping $1 trillion in a closed loop. Two important things about this. The number of intelligence data points to improve their product, to educate their model, is so much larger on Google by a factor of a Google billion. I mean, just think about the number of times you've typed into email and then it's completed your sentence for you. That is Gemini training. It's creepy as fuck, don't get me wrong, but it has so many more data points every day from every human on Earth, right? 2, 3, 4 billion people. It's getting smarter faster. It's providing a better product. It is also marketing itself in subtle ways, that in a way that nobody else in the marketplace can. Now, here's the other major crucial difference between Google and the rest of big tech, and specifically the rest of the AI closed loop circle jerk. They don't buy chips from NVIDIA. They make their own chips.
Ooh, I did not know that.
Yes. NVIDIA is selling chips, is loaning money to OpenAI and Anthropic and CoreWeave and Elon Musk. And then there's a guaranteed deal back to buy chips from NVIDIA. That's how that market works. Microsoft is lending money to OpenAI and all these other companies and putting money through special purpose vehicles to build data centers around the rest of the world, but it comes back in contracts for infrastructure for them. It's a big round trip. The difference here is Google pays for everything through advertising.
No.
right? Biggest ad platform on the face of the earth, net revenue growing, right? Net income growing. And they buy their own fucking chips. It's a closed economy. Every dollar spent goes back into the company. TPUs, not GPUs. That's a major difference between what Google is up to and what everybody else is up to. And it's why Apple's buying tech from Google. You also have to remember that Google pays Apple. When you look at Apple's net revenue, Google is paying Apple. This came out in the court case.
Yeah.
$20 billion a year at least to be the pre-installed search on Apple iPhones. That's not going anywhere, and it creates a huge reliance between Apple on Google. So there's this huge difference shifting in the marketplace, and market is valuing Google, I think, finally, appropriately. There are going to be a lot of people out there in our comment section says, yes, monopoly. But they've weathered that storm. They fought off all the court cases. They are not going to be broken up. And I think you're seeing a major shift, a major recalculation in the entire media universe based on intelligence as the main product.
Okay, let's go back to Apple for a second, right? You've mentioned the fact that Google is overpassing Apple in valuation. We're seeing iPhone sales flattening, etc. We do see the service segment growing, right? But what are you seeing coming up this year? How do you think Apple is going to react to that? What is in the books?
Yeah, I think. Look, Tim Cook has done an amazing job. He is one of the big reasons why that company was and has been the most valuable company on earth for a number of months of the last number of years. He gets credit for starting the services division, which is the only segment that's really experiencing major growth right now. But they have missed this moment very dramatically, specifically AI. But also, if you look at their media enterprises, we've talked about this. Apple TV Plus or Apple TV is a good product, but it's limited because of the amount of content they have. They're not taking it that seriously. And I would say that about their entire services segment. So Tim Cook will be gone by the end of this year. And I think Apple's fortunes go with whomever they choose next. There's a bunch of internal candidates that they're looking at, including Eddie Q. And it is definitely a new generation of leadership, regardless of who they choose, from boomer to Gen Xer. So, but Apple has a major examination of itself it needs to do and who it wants to be in the media world and in the big tech world on a moving forward basis, because they are losing ground to NVIDIA, to Microsoft, to Google, especially if you look at the trajectories of market caps, net revenues, revenues in core products over the last 5 years. It is a dramatic story between those two companies. So it needs a leadership change. It's probably a year or two too late. But they also are Apple. So, Steve Jobs left and Tim Cook took it over and everybody doubted him and he did a great job. So this is a pivotal year in the history of that company, though.
Yeah, because you haven't mentioned it, but when you look at the hardware side of business, besides the fact that Google is making more on the rest than Apple is making on hardware devices, even on that, Google is challenging head to head our friends at Apple, right? I have an iPhone, but if you look at a global level, we're talking 1/3 iPhone and 2/3 Android, right?
Yeah, that's another really interesting point here is in Apple's headquarters, their landscape, the place that they're supposed to win, which is the iPhone, right? They do great on revenues. But as far as market share goes, they are about 70-30 on the wrong side of that to Android.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about user-centric media from a moving forward basis, and you think about the day that you start and end with that piece of glass in your hand, and you think about intelligence now being the most important product out there, the reach of Android, Google, Gemini, YouTube is so much larger than the reach of Apple. And, that worked for Apple because they concentrated only on rich people for a long period of time. Things are shifting now.
Okay, cool. So that takes us to our question of the week. Are we entering the era of commodity hardware?
I think so. I think when you look at what's happening, like we just said, Android and iOS, the battle there. I think if you look at intelligence now being overvalued, more valued than hardware itself, you look at the deals between Roku and Amazon and Vizio and Walmart and Amazon and Google and Roku. I think who makes the hardware? First of all, it's not a very profitable business.
Yeah.
Right. And second of all, I think who controls the intelligence inside is going to become increasingly important for the rest of this decade.
I actually wonder if, we were talking about Gemini becoming the AI by default to power Siri. Is that the beginning of them taking over the OS inside Apple devices and beyond? Are we going to keep talking about OSs? Or is it going to be now, talking about AI? What's the AI model? Who's running everything?
I don't know that those things will wind up being differentiated. I mean, 20 years ago, if I had said operating system to you, most people wouldn't have known what that meant, right?
Yeah.
There's another key component here that point I wanted to make. We used to pay for email. No one pays
Really?
specifically for yeah.
No, you're too
Yeah,
old. I don't
we used
remember
to
that.
subscribe to AOL. One of the big reasons was email, right? And
That's
we
true.
used to now we pay for water and email is ostensibly free, but it's not because you're
Yeah.
paying for it as part of a larger suite of services. We don't pay for search, except we absolutely do with our attention and our ad dollars and everything else. AI is one of those things, and operating systems are kind of one of those things too. You don't pay for an operating system, but you absolutely pay for it. I will say that Apple's operating system is ass. It's terrible. Every time you get an update from them, it's worse than the time it was
Mm.
before. The current OS is just crap.
And
And
yet and yet we're still buying iPhones. Those who are, you were talking about the fact that it's a 1/3, 2/3 market share, but those who are
But
iPhone aficionados.
our search is Google, our AI is
Yeah, yeah,
something else, and so, you're right to ask that question. Will eventually the OS be Google's operating system or Android? To a certain extent, Amazon still operates off an Android-ish thing with
yeah,
Fire. They started by building off of Android because it's open source to a certain
yeah,
extent.
yeah. And it works
So,
better than most.
it's a
Yeah,
great question. It is
yeah.
a great question. So I think hardware, look, I love my Apple products, but they are very fucking expensive. So I do think the commoditization of hardware over the supremacy of intelligence is
Yeah.
something to watch for the rest of this decade.
Okay, so that's a wrap on episode 3
No,
of the
episode
Media
4.
Odyssey.
We just did a live episode earlier this week about the Netflix earnings. Do you remember? We were together in the UK. How
Yeah,
can you
yeah,
forget?
yeah, yeah.
So go
Yeah,
check that out in our feed if you missed that. We recapped the Netflix earnings just hours after they came out. We've got just recorded an episode that'll come out next week with Shir Lazar, who mapped the creator economy with me last fall. We're going to talk about that with her. And we're going to talk about her mental health program for creators, which is a super interesting thing that she's been working on for almost a year now. And we've got a ton of other great stuff coming up, including a podcast that we're doing from Lisbon at Stream TV, where you and I will both be. Definitely join us at Stream TV in Lisbon. We're both going to be there live doing amazing content with amazing people. You've got a great whole day of programming. I've got 3 days of panels in which you're in as well. Passes are now on sale for that. And if you haven't gotten the hint, go read Marion's newsletter, Substack, Streaming Made Easy, and maybe check out mine, Media War and
Media
Peace
Odyssey.
on Substack as all. It's great to see you as all. I'm sorry I missed you at CES in
Yeah,
Vegas.
the snow, what can you do? Next year, 2027. I'll make it.
Cool. Thanks for checking out Media Odyssey Podcast. We'll see you next week.